You're standing in a crowd of thousands. The President of the United States walks out onto a stage just a few meters away. The cheers are deafening. Flags are waving. And somewhere in that same crowd, someone has a weapon and a plan. What happens in the next few seconds will either be forgotten by morning or remembered forever. Most people never think about what's happening behind the scenes at a moment like that. The invisible wall between the president and anyone who wants to harm him. It's not just bodyguards in dark suits with earpieces. It's a machine. A massive, constantly evolving, highly classified machine built over decades and paid for in blood. So today, we're pulling back the curtain. How does presidential protection actually work? What does it take to keep the most powerful person on Earth alive? And has the system ever come dangerously close to failing? The answer to that last question will surprise you. To understand what presidential protection looks like today, you have to go back to the moment the old system completely fell apart. November 22nd, 1963. Dallas, Texas. President John F. Kennedy is riding through the city in an open-top convertible, something his security detail wasn't thrilled about, but Kennedy insisted. He wanted to be seen. He wanted to feel close to the people. And for a president who was constantly breaking protocol, swimming in unsecured open water, inviting unvetted strangers into his private quarters, throwing himself into uncontrolled crowds, this was just another day. The night before, several of the agents assigned to protect him had been out until the early hours of the morning at a local bar. Some weren't back until 5 a.m. Their shift started at 8. The route through Dallas had been published in the newspapers days in advance. None of the buildings along the way had been checked. And Kennedy had asked his protective agents to ride in separate vehicles. He didn't want to look like he needed a royal guard. When the shots rang out, the agent driving Kennedy's limousine slowed down, confused, waiting for instructions. Another agent sprinted toward the car, made it to the trunk, and reached for the president. He was too late. Within 6 seconds of the first shot, Kennedy was dead. What followed was a national reckoning. The United States was now the most powerful country in the world. Its enemies were multiplying. And it had just lost a sitting president in broad daylight, in front of thousands of witnesses, because a handful of exhausted agents were guarding a man riding in a convertible down a publicly announced route past buildings nobody had checked. Something had to change. And it did, dramatically. In the years following Kennedy's assassination, the Secret Service was essentially rebuilt from the ground up. What had previously been a small, lean operation, barely 350 agents total, only 36 assigned to the White House, was transformed into a sophisticated, multi-layered security apparatus. The old approach of hiring tough ex-military men and handing them a manual was gone. In its place came rigorous recruitment standards, intensive training programs, and a completely new philosophy. Protection isn't about reacting to threats. It's about making sure threats never reach the president in the first place. And when you look at how that philosophy plays out in practice, it's genuinely staggering. 10 days before any public event, advanced teams of agents are already on the ground at the location. For something like a presidential inauguration, that preparation starts up to a year and a half out. These agents aren't just checking sight lines and planning exit routes. They're thinking like attackers. Could someone cut the power to create chaos? Is there an air conditioning system that could be tampered with? Is there a forgotten basement entrance that's not on the official blueprints? Every possible vulnerability gets mapped and addressed before the president ever sets foot in the building. On the day itself, the layers of protection are extraordinary. You have the protective detail, the agents most people picture, the ones in the suits who stay within arm's reach of the president and are trained to place their own bodies between him and any incoming threat. But they're really just the innermost layer. Outside of them is the counter-assault team, heavily armed agents whose entire job is to charge directly toward any attack, neutralizing it before it can reach the president. While everyone else is moving the president away from danger, these agents are running toward it. Then there's the counter-sniper team, some of the most elite marksmen in the country. To stay on the team, they have to demonstrate every single month that they can still make an accurate shot from 1,000 yards away. Miss that test, and you're pulled from active duty. Blending into the crowd are plainclothes agents, no earpieces, no obvious suits, deliberately indistinguishable from regular attendees. They're trained to think like assassins. In any given space, they're constantly asking themselves, if I wanted to cause harm here, how would I do it? And they're feeding that information back to a central operations center in real time. Overhead, the airspace security branch monitors the sky. On the ground, highly trained dogs are sniffing vehicles, up to 100 cars a day each, for explosive materials. And moving through all of it, carrying the president himself, is a vehicle that might be the most fortified car ever built, an armored limousine weighing nearly 10 tons, sealed against chemical attacks, stocked with emergency medical supplies including blood matching the president's exact type, and equipped with defensive systems the government has never fully disclosed to the public. All of this, working together, simultaneously, every single time the president steps outside. But systems are only as strong as the moments they're tested. And there have been moments that pushed this system right to its edge. March 30th, 1981. Washington, D.C. A disturbed young man named John Hinckley Jr. had become obsessed with an actress after watching a film in which a character plots to kill a presidential candidate. Hinckley, adrift and desperate for significance, decided he would do the same thing in real life, not because of any political belief, but because he thought it would impress the object of his obsession. What makes the story even more chilling is that 6 months earlier, Hinckley had been arrested at an airport attempting to board a plane with 3 loaded pistols. That arrest was flagged by the FBI. But under the guidelines in place at the time, it was considered too minor to be passed along to the Secret Service. Nobody connected the dots. When Hinckley opened fire outside a Washington hotel, one agent didn't think, he just moved. He threw himself directly into the line of fire, taking a bullet to the torso so the president didn't have to. President Reagan was struck anyway, a bullet that ricocheted off his armored car and entered his body at the armpit. He lost enough blood that a few more minutes without surgery might have been fatal. Reagan survived. And the Secret Service, as it always does after a near miss, went back to the drawing board. Metal detectors became standard at all public presidential events. The service also built a much more sophisticated threat classification system, a way of tracking individuals who make threats and assessing how seriously to take them based on their history, their mental state, and whether they have the capability to actually follow through. And critically, the lines of communication between the Secret Service and the FBI were completely overhauled. What happened with Hinckley, a clear warning sign that never reached the right people, was never supposed to happen again. Then came September 11, 2001, and a completely different kind of test. President Bush was in Florida that morning, sitting in a second-grade classroom for a publicized education event, when news of the attacks began coming in. The Secret Service wanted him out immediately. But in those chaotic first minutes, there was no clear protocol for overruling White House staff who didn't want to alarm the children or the cameras still rolling in the room. 7 excruciating minutes passed before Bush was moved. It exposed a gap nobody had fully prepared for. The service was very good at protecting a president from lone attackers. It wasn't clear that it had the authority, or the playbook, to handle a coordinated terrorist attack targeting the commander-in-chief directly. After September 11th, that changed. A new unit was created to monitor airspace around the president. Emergency action plans were completely rewritten. And for the first time, it was formally established that no political staffer could overrule a Secret Service agent trying to evacuate the president. But there's a tension in all of this that doesn't go away. The job of the White House communications team is to make the president visible, relatable, connected to ordinary people. The job of the Secret Service is to do the opposite, to minimize exposure, control every environment, and eliminate unpredictability. These two goals are in permanent conflict. And sometimes, that conflict has consequences. The system held. But the cracks were visible. And then in 2024, in Butler, Pennsylvania, the system came closer to failing than it had in decades. A gunman positioned himself on a rooftop with a clear line of sight to former President Trump at a campaign rally. He opened fire. Trump was struck but survived. 6 agents were suspended. The director of the Secret Service resigned. The questions that followed were the same ones the agency has faced at every major turning point in its history. How did this happen? What was missed? And what needs to change? Here's what's easy to miss in all of this. The Secret Service's most remarkable achievement isn't the moments of heroism under fire, the agents who take bullets, the counter-assault teams who charge toward shooters. Those moments are extraordinary, but they're also relatively rare. The real achievement is everything that doesn't happen. Every threat that gets quietly neutralized before it becomes a headline. Every event that ends without incident, not because nothing was attempted, but because the machine working invisibly in the background caught it early enough that nobody ever knew. Since 1963, no sitting U.S. president has been killed. Given the scale of the threats, the number of public appearances, the complexity of modern attacks, and the political firestorm that surrounds every presidency, that's a genuinely remarkable record. It's not a record maintained by perfection. The Secret Service has made mistakes, sometimes serious ones, and the consequences of those mistakes have occasionally been nearly catastrophic. But the agency has also shown, time and again, that it can absorb a failure, learn from it, and build something stronger in its place. That's ultimately what the history of presidential protection is, not a story of an invincible shield, but a story of an institution constantly learning, adapting, and rebuilding itself in the shadow of its own worst moments. And somewhere out there right now, advanced teams are already on the ground for the president's next event, checking sight lines, mapping exits, thinking like attackers, making sure that whatever today's threat looks like, the system is ready for it.